Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we are taking a deep dive into the world of metabolism. It's going to be a fascinating one.
It is.
So we're talking about how our bodies process food so differently.
Right.
Depending on if you're male or female.
Yeah.
Which I don't know about you, but
Really interesting.
I find that absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, it really challenges, I think, a lot of the conventional wisdom around,
Right.
diet and health. And
Totally.
we get so caught up in these general recommendations.
Yeah.
But this research really shows how important those individual differences are.
For sure. And the research that we are unpacking today comes from a really unique study.
Yes.
The Copenhagen Perspective Studies on Asthma in Children.
Wow.
COPSAC 2000, they've been tracking this group for years.
Oh.
And now they're giving us this peek
Yeah.
into the inner workings of 298 young adults.
So what's really fascinating about this group is that they're at this pivotal point in life.
Right.
Where their metabolic health is really being shaped for the long haul.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the sneak peek into, potential for future health issues.
Yeah.
And how we might be able to get ahead of them.
Okay, so imagine you're 18 again, right?
Right.
You sign up for the study, and they hit you with this thing called an OGPLTT.
Catchy.
I know.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like the science experiment where
Yeah.
after fasting, you down this mega-calorie drink.
Okay, so we're talking 75 grams of glucose.
Oh, my God.
60 grams of palm oil.
Yeah, no, this is not your average smoothie.
20 grams of skimmed milk powder, all blended together.
Wow.
A 947-calorie concoction.
Good Lord.
Designed to really put those metabolisms to the test.
Okay, but here's the thing.
Okay.
They weren't just looking at what these folks weighed
Right.
or their BMI. They used this really sophisticated technique to basically take a metabolic fingerprint,
Okay.
measuring all sorts of tiny molecules in the blood called metabolites.
Got it.
And this is where the real detective work starts.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like we're uncovering this hidden language within our bodies.
I like that.
Each metabolite is like this tiny clue. And when we put them all together, they paint this really vivid picture of what's going on at a cellular level. And get this. They found some pretty dramatic differences between the men and women in this study.
Okay, spill the tea.
Okay.
What kind of differences are we talking about here?
Well, the men, for example, they had much bigger swings in their metabolism
Interesting.
after downing this calorie bomb.
Okay.
It's like their bodies were on this metabolic roller coaster ride.
Oh, wow.
And those wild swings were directly related to their insulin resistance,
Okay.
their BMI, and even their waist-to-height ratio.
So even in these young, relatively healthy guys, are you saying that those metabolic roller coasters
Yeah,
could be early warning signs of potential health issues down the line?
exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the women in this study, they actually started out with higher insulin resistance on average.
Okay.
But here's the kicker.
Okay.
Their bodies didn't seem as fazed by the mega-calorie drink.
Wait, so the women were less affected even though they started out with higher insulin resistance.
Isn't that interesting?
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's a head scratcher.
It really highlights the complexity of metabolism
Yeah.
and how it can vary so much between individuals and even between sexes.
Yeah. So does this mean that we should be scrapping BMI as this end-all be-all measure
Yeah.
of metabolic health, especially for men?
This study definitely adds to a growing body of evidence
Okay.
that suggests that BMI alone doesn't tell the whole story.
Right.
In fact, when they dug a little deeper, they found that for men, waist-to-height ratio, which is a measure of that dangerous visceral fat
Right.
around your organs,
Uh-huh.
was a much stronger predictor of those post-meal metabolic roller coasters.
So where you carry that weight, especially that visceral fat, could be a much bigger factor
Yeah.
than your overall weight or your BMI.
For sure.
That's really important to know.
It really underscores the need to look beyond these simple metrics
Yeah.
and consider the bigger picture when we're assessing metabolic health.
Okay, so we've got these intriguing differences between how men and women's metabolisms react to a mega-calorie challenge.
Right.
But let's talk about those chemical clues, those metabolites that they were tracking.
Yes.
What did those reveal?
So this is where it gets really fascinating.
Okay.
Remember, each metabolite is like a piece of the puzzle,
Yeah.
and some of them stood out as these really important clues. One of the most intriguing findings was the link between specific amino acids
Okay.
and insulin resistance. And you see these amino acids, called BCAAs, are often associated with protein intake.
So you're telling me that even something as seemingly straightforward as protein might have different effects depending on your sex.
That's what this research suggests.
Wow.
It really throws a wrench into those one-size-fits-all diet recommendations that we hear so much about.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you should eat this much protein.
Right.
This is how much protein you should eat.
Yeah, and it's like, well, hold on.
Well,
there's more to it.
It might depend. Exactly.
Yeah.
It might depend who you are. It really challenges this idea that there's one perfect diet for everybody.
Right.
You know, this research suggests we might need to be thinking about tailoring our protein intake based on our individual needs.
Yeah.
And even our sex.
Personalized protein, that's a new one.
Right.
Okay, so BCAAs are on the radar.
Yeah. What other metabolic clues were sending up red flags?
Well, they also uncovered some interesting connections between certain metabolites and those worrisome deposits of visceral fat.
Right.
Remember, that's the fat.
Yeah, visceral fat, not our friend.
Lurking around your organs, and it's linked to a whole host of health problems.
What were these metabolites trying to tell us?
One that stood out was VLDL-TG, which is basically a measure of triglycerides, a type of fat being transported in your blood.
Okay.
And high levels of these triglycerides are a well-known risk factor for heart disease.
Okay, so not just any triglycerides, but the ones specifically associated with heart health?
Right.
And I'm guessing they found a connection between those and visceral fat?
You got it. And not surprisingly, this connection was particularly strong in the men,
who had higher levels of insulin resistance and more of that visceral fat.
So even in these 18-year-olds, we're already seeing signs of potential heart risks down the line.
It's true.
Especially in those with like the double whammy of the higher insulin resistance and visceral fat.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if we should be screening for this stuff earlier.
I think that's a conversation worth having.
Right.
And speaking of potential heart risks,
there's
another key player in this metabolic puzzle, the ApoBAPO-A1 ratio.
Now that sounds a bit like a robot from Star Wars.
Right.
Break that down for me. What is the ApoBAPO-A1 ratio all about?
Think of it as a tug of war.
Okay.
Between the good cholesterol and the bad cholesterol in your blood.
Okay.
The ApoA1 is like the good guy, helping remove excess cholesterol from your arteries, keeping things running smoothly. But ApoB, that's the troublemaker.
Okay.
The one that can lead to plaque buildup and increase your risk of heart disease.
So a higher ratio basically means the bad cholesterol is winning the tug of war.
Right, exactly.
Which is not a battle you want to lose.
Right.
And did the study find a connection between that ratio and insulin resistance and visceral fat too?
Exactly. Men with higher insulin resistance and more of that visceral fat tended to have a higher ApoBAPO-A1 ratio.
Okay.
Suggesting that they might be at higher risk for heart problems down the road.
Wow.
Even in early adulthood.
That's wild.
It's like they're already showing signs of those risk factors we typically associate with older adults.
And a little scary, to be honest.
Yeah.
Makes you realize that taking care of your metabolic health isn't something you can just like put off until you're older.
Right.
Right.
It's true.
Okay, so we've talked about GlycA, BCAAs, VLDL-TG, and the ApoBAPO-A1 ratio.
Right.
Quite the lineup of metabolic suspects.
Right.
What stood out to you about these findings? What was the most surprising thing you uncovered in this data?
You know what really fascinates me is that the study didn't just look at these metabolites in a fasting state.
Oh, right.
But also after the participants downed that mega-calorie drink.
Right. We haven't even gotten to the after effects of that metabolic overload yet.
Right.
What happened when they tracked those metabolites after the meal?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about the men having those roller coaster-like metabolic responses to the meal?
Yeah.
Well, some of their metabolites seem to do a complete 180 after they ate.
Wait, a 180. So something that might have looked like a red flag in a fasting state might actually be beneficial after a meal.
Exactly.
Wow.
Take alanine and tyrosine, for example.
Okay.
Those are amino acids that showed a positive association with insulin resistance and adiposity in the fasting state.
Oh, okay.
But then get this. A negative association after the meal.
Hold on. Are you saying that what's considered a bad metabolite in a fasting state might actually be a good thing after you eat?
Is possible.
This metabolic puzzle is getting more and more complex.
That's the beauty of science.
Right.
It often raises more questions than it answers.
Right.
But those questions can lead to even more profound insights.
Sure.
And in this case, it just goes to show that our metabolic responses to food are incredibly dynamic.
Yeah.
What we see in a fasting state doesn't necessarily reflect what's happening after a meal. And that's why this study is so groundbreaking.
Okay.
It's giving us a much more nuanced understanding of how our bodies handle the food we eat.
It's definitely making a strong case for more research that looks at both fasting and post-meal metabolism.
Yeah, for sure.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's bring it back to the here and now.
Okay.
What does all of this mean for our listeners?
Yeah, that's the important question, right?
Right.
I think the key takeaway here is that our metabolism is incredibly personalized.
Not one size fits all.
Exactly. What works for one person might not work for another.
Right.
And understanding those individual differences, even those related to sex, could be the key to optimizing our health.
It's like we each have our own unique metabolic fingerprint. And understanding that fingerprint could be the key to unlocking better health. It's like we each have our own unique metabolic fingerprint.
Right.
And understanding that fingerprint could be the key to unlocking better health.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for how we approach diet and lifestyle?
Right.
Are we talking about ditching those generic recommendations and embracing a more personalized approach?
I think that's the ultimate goal.
Okay.
Imagine a future where we move beyond these one-size-fits-all diet plans.
Right.
And instead focus on tailoring our recommendations based on an individual's metabolic profile.
Okay.
Even their sex.
Personalized nutrition and lifestyle plans based on your metabolic fingerprint, that's pretty mind-blowing.
It is. It's like having this roadmap to better health.
Right.
Starting at a young age.
Yeah.
No more guessing games. No more following the latest fads.
Right.
Just targeted strategies based on how your unique body works.
That's the dream.
Right.
But until we get to that point,
right,
what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this research?
Oh, that's a good question.
If they're feeling overwhelmed by all this complex science,
right,
what's the key message they should remember?
I would say this. Your metabolism is not set in stone.
Okay. So it's not like you're stuck with the metabolism you were born with.
Right.
You can actually change it.
Absolutely. It's dynamic, it's adaptable,
okay,
and you have more power than you think to influence it through your lifestyle choices.
That's empowering.
It is.
So even small changes to our diet, our exercise routine,
right,
even how we manage stress, those things can actually make a difference in how our metabolism functions.
Exactly.
Wow.
Every choice you make sends a signal to your metabolism.
Okay.
And over time, those signals can add up to big changes in your overall health.
So pay attention to those lifestyle choices.
Right.
Because they really do matter.
They do.
And in the meantime,
yeah,
maybe don't stress too much about the finer points of GlycA and ApoB ratios just yet.
Let's leave that to the scientists for now.
Okay.
But stay curious.
Okay.
Keep asking questions.
Always.
Keep exploring.
Curiosity is what keeps us coming back for more deep dives.
Exactly.
Now, we can't wrap up this episode without a final thought-provoking question for our listeners, something to ponder as they go about their day.
Right.
So what's the big question the study leaves you with?
You know, given these significant metabolic differences between men and women and the potential long-term health implications, it really makes you wonder, could tailoring our approach to nutrition and lifestyle based on both our sex and our individual metabolic profiles be the key to preventing chronic diseases?
Wow.
Like type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease.
That is a big question, and one we're definitely going to be keeping a close eye on as more research emerges.
For sure.
So until next time,
yes,
keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Keep asking questions.
Keep asking questions.
And as always, thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
It's been fun.
Yeah, it has.